So this is what to expect from macOS Monterey, the return to service, Apple MDM, and oh, so much more. My name is Pam Lefkowitz. I'm the IT columnist here at JumpCloud. I'm an IT columnist here at JumpCloud. We have lots of people. I am joined today by Bradley Chambers, who is the digital marketing manager at Cribble and freelance writer at 9to5Mac, who covers all things Apple, and by Tom Bridge, who is now the principal produce manager, the principal product manager for Apple stuff. That would have been good.
I'm great with cabbage. I'm just saying.
And apples
a fruit.
apparently. Right. For Apple stuff at JumpCloud, and he is the host of the MacAdmins podcast. So today we are going to talk about, that's us. New features in Monterey. I'm sure you've heard of many of these. Increased security, software update, erase all kinds. These are all the things we're going to be talking about today. But wait, there's more. Shortcuts, hide my mail, iCloud private relay, live text, and FaceTime. So let's get into it. We're going to increase in security around Pam with Monterey, but not that Pam. Tom.
Yeah, so the Apple has made some changes around the security of the environment, and if you're an Apple admin, you've got no shortage of understanding of things like the new methodology that Apple has chosen over the last 3 or 4 years to protect certain parts of the operating system. This year, the Etsy /Etsy/pam.d folder was added to the protected area of the system, where either you need a privacy preferences policy control policy for anything that touches that space. Why is that important? Well, how many different organizations actually do some interesting things here? If you've ever set your touch bar having Mac to use your Touch ID credential as part of the pseudo privileges, for example, you've messed around in /Etsy/pam.d. And so now Apple wants you to make sure that anything that is changed inside those folders is user approved. And so as related to that, there were obviously some changes that were required there on JumpCloud's side of the line, where essentially you need to make sure that JumpCloud has permissions to operate in those spaces. And so if you've been using JumpCloud for mobile device management, you've already been granted those permissions. But if you're combining JumpCloud with Jamf or Mosel or Mobile Iron or Workspace ONE, whatever you have, you need to update your privacy preferences policy control policies to include some different pieces that are there. There's a there's a KBase article that JumpCloud wrote with a sample profile that you can use to do this kind of things. But this was the biggest change in security in terms of existing mechanisms. That Apple expanded the gatekeeper modules and expanded the ability to actually touch individual files on the system across a couple of different platforms. So I think that's the biggest change in the increase in security around pluggable access. So I always get them confused, right? It's pluggable authentication modules and permissive access management. And the latter gives you nuclear weapons and the former lets you log into your computer. So they're all the same thing, right?
Exactly. Bradley, you have anything to add on that?
I think that the key thing to remember here, and obviously now it doesn't matter, but we knew these changes were coming, and this is what the summer beta period is for, and this is one of the things you really should have been looking at and talking to your vendors about. And I think obviously, like something we covered when Big Sur was released, MDM, this approved way is the only really way going forward to manage Apple devices. And this is the kind of stuff where, had you been stuck on a legacy system, you might have been in a really big world of hurt. What you really don't want is a situation to where you've got 1,000 remote employees and you go to new version of macOS and everything just falls apart. So again, these are the kind of things like next summer, pay attention to updates around these things, and this is where your testing comes into play.
And looking at that, this was a late breaking change in the cycle. This was not in betas 1, 2, and 3. This was an arrival in beta 4. And so this was a late breaking update for Apple. So this is why it's important not just to test at the beginning of the cycle and the end of the cycle, because you miss all that time in between. But here at JumpCloud, we're obviously testing all the time to make sure that our agent can handle the new version of the operating system. It's a big part of making sure that we've got day one support for macOS Monterey.
Great, thanks, guys. Is there anything that the admin should be aware of before they update? Should they?
I mean, obviously,
Train their
having some sort of
users?
policy available to your individual Macs ahead of arrival is certainly very, very important. However, you can do it after the fact as well. It's just a matter of assigning a certain MDM profile to a specific set of devices.
And I believe we have a KBase article on that.
We do, and it's in the resources slide at the end of this presentation.
Excellent. Software updates. What's new and different with software updates? Bradley?
I'll let Tom take this one. I want the
software
original
updates
content.
a lot of fun, right? One of the challenges that we faced over the last few years is that there's really been no great way to require that an individual operating system be installed on a given machine without the user's consent. Apple's been big on essentially participating with that process and making sure that updates are required. You can certainly, you've had the ability to, for some time, delay the update so that if you're not ready as an organization, you can say, hey, I need a little bit more time here. I got 30 days until our security vendor delivers a new version that's supported for macOS Monterey, for example. And there are policies that you can draw out to basically say, hey, don't prompt anybody for a no major version update. But one of the challenges has been, how do we make sure that our users update in a timely fashion? And so what Apple has provided with macOS Monterey is the ability to essentially say, hey, I would like this machine over here to install the newest version of the operating system sometime tonight. And you could do this before, but there was no way to make sure that the user actually said, yeah, install that. That's cool. There was only a way to essentially rely on the user's trust and basically be prompted to, hit that update button. And, in my previous days as a MacAdmin, we had one user, for example, that we found sometime in, late 2019, who was still running a version of 10.12.4. Which was at the time 3.5 years old, which meant that for 1,000 days, she had just clicked install later or not today in the little message in the upper right-hand corner. What Apple's been unable to deliver before now was a way to basically say, you get 5 chances on this. And this is now specifiable during an MDM command that says install later, and you get 5 deferrals. And so in those particular cases, the end user will get a prompt that says, hey, I need you to do this update, and I need you to do it sometime in the next 5 days. And at the end of that process, they will essentially be told, hey, there are no more deferrals remaining. Enter your password and make sure that your machine's plugged in, and off you go to the races. This isn't as aggressive as I wanted Apple to be here, because there are still circumstances that will prevent that update from being installed. And if your user is cagey, they can just keep their battery under 50% and they'll never get installed. And so, if you have somebody who is deeply and abidingly dedicated to the version, 12.0.1 of macOS Monterey, 6 months from now, and they're like, I really loved it when it was in 12.01, said no one ever. But in those cases, there are still some ways where you're going to need to bring other methods to the table in order to encourage adoption and encourage updates. But you're going to have some more settings that are available to you as a MacAdmin to basically say, hey, look, best efforts, right? Like, we're trying to do this with the best effort where user consent's involved, and all of those things are available, and you can actually do that kind of work. And of course, the install update with a force command is still a part of your arsenal as an admin. Just recognize that, if your user if you've gotten to the point where that's the tool you're having to use, you're going to need to, really make sure that your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted when it comes to notifications.
Well, and I think there is a misconception too that a lot of times, like, people are like trying to evade IT's updates, and I think in my experience with users, People look at their operating system like I look at the operating system of my washing machine. When I want to use my washing machine, I'm not really caring to use a software update. I just want to wash my clothes. And I think most users are that way. I've seen people delay Office updates for, as long as possible until like where Office just stops working because people don't want to take the time. And
Right.
where I would love to see Apple go here in the future is to be able to do more updates. Now, obviously, major updates like this are probably not in our lifetime is going to be that case, to where things can be done without requiring restart. And there's a lot of things involved there. And because I don't think that people are trying to avoid updates, they just don't want to stop working. It's like,
Well, that's it.
you know,
I mean, it's a 30-minute update cycle for most of these kind of updates. But, if we look at what Apple's given us here, especially for those users who are using Apple Silicon machines, the ability for an MDM to essentially say, hey, try and do this tonight, will just, use the bootstrap token, which is generated by the system and escrowed with the MDM to do that authenticated restart so that you come back not having to fully boot your machine. You come back to a system that's ready to go to work the next day. And that's one of the things that I love about the install later option that Apple has given us and that is more effective now in macOS Monterey, is that you get back to the same state you left your system in with, rare exception. Now, occasionally you'll find an app that, maybe didn't have saved work. So like a Word doc that was open or a terminal session left running or any number of things that can really block a system update like that. But if you can really focus your messaging to your coworkers as, hey, install later is going to do its thing, it's going to put you back in a good working state, and you're not going to have to spend 40 minutes rebooting your system. Just let it do it at night. It's fine.
Right. The
Well,
last
Tom,
thing
will
we
that
want.
work over battery or like if it's on battery, like if you're at 100% battery, at the end of the night, I throw it into my bag. Will it still update or does it require AC power to
No, it
kick off
still
that update?
requires a power adapter in most of those situations. I think that, most of the time you're looking at maybe a 10% battery hit in those cases. But, what we tend to find is that, at least now during the pandemic, everybody tends to leave their machine, plugged in at least twice a week. Overnight. I mean, the M1 batteries are good, but they're not like mythic, right? I mean, you still need to plug them in a couple of times a week. And those are the times that we try to encourage people to just say, hey, look, I'm going to accept that update for tonight.
Right. Erasing all contents.
It's a
I
great
know this
picture.
one. This one is Tom's favorite.
I like
This
the
is my
picture that we had in the other one with the walking away from the GIF with the burning building. But I think this is my favorite part of macOS Monterey. And I think it's fundamentally one of something that's going to impact most IT professionals time-wise of this release. Now, to understand why this is here just now, because we've had this on iOS, I guess, as long as I can remember. I can't remember back. I remember managing the first iPad over iPhone configuration utility. Those are fun days. But, always on iOS, you've been able to wipe essentially not having to like plug it up to a Mac and reinstall iOS. Well, what we didn't have on macOS was having the user data and the system data like logically separated. And I guess it was in Big Sur is when that became a thing. Is that remember
I think it was before then. It was in Catalina.
Yeah, it was in Catalina.
And they all run together in pandemic years. Well, so now what you can do, you can erase the user data securely without having to reinstall macOS. And if you think about, again, I think of everything as like, how does this scale if I manage 1,000 people that were all work remotely that I may have never be managing machines that I will never, ever, ever, ever touch until it's decommissioned, because if it's deployed with zero touch, instead of having to try to walk the user through like how to erase the machine or ship it back, now you can essentially erase this machine and erase all the user data, erase the company data without having to reinstall the operating system. So when you start thinking about having to decommission machines, you can know that machine doesn't leave the user that is having to take that to FedEx to ship back to wherever you're receiving the machines back, or whether it's a leasing company or whatever. Before it gets in the box that has all company data and all personal data of the user removed. And to me, very, very transformative feature.
Absolutely. And I think that the best possible way for us to demonstrate how valuable this is, it was when you think about it, when you've got a machine that you've got in its state, when it's out in the hands of the user of just come back and you want to get it ready to go again. In a lot of cases, that requires, a whole lengthy trip through, wipe, reinstalling the operating system. It's a 45 to 60-minute process right now. And so if we think about it from that perspective, well, how do we make that better? And the answer is, here we are, in my demo tenant at JumpCloud, we've got the everybody's named after Ted Lasso characters, because why not? We'll say that this is the PR director's machine or the director of football operations, and they've been sacked, right? And so essentially at that point, once you actually click the button to erase their machine, which I have just clicked now, it takes a second for the command to get down to the device, but we'd be looking at an hour to get this machine ready for the next person. But now you can tell that this machine has just restarted. And in about 60 to 120 seconds or so, we're going to be back at the setup assistant.
That's
This is
seconds,
how
not
little
minutes.
time it takes. Yeah, 60 seconds. And so you can see that the machine is now rebooting the system from there. It has gone through and tossed out the previous user data section of the hard drive. And we're going to be back ready at system preferences here in just a minute, or the setup assistant, where you can go through and recommission this machine for someone. It turns a 60-minute task into about a 3-minute task. And so the ability for you to essentially say, hey, look, I want to make sure that this machine is ready to go for the next person, and the next person is going to be here in 5 minutes. The erase in all contents and settings is your friend here. And it's going to give you most of what you need most of the time. There are some sorry, it was very loud on the reboot cycle there. But when you think about getting machines ready for new employees and that new experience of zero touch enrollment and getting machines directly in the hands of the people who need them when they need them. This also lets you do something like maybe what you do before you, if you've got a machine transfer happening, that you essentially the last thing that they do on that machine is just erase the device and then they send it on to the next person. And so this is a way that you could do demo operations for, a specific piece at that point where everybody gets through that process. And you get back to the setup assistant as quickly as possible, because that's really what you're looking for as an organization is rapid return to service workflows. And while M1 gave us the ability to do that in 6 minutes or 6 to 8 minutes over USB-C while directly connected, the ability to take an existing operating machine and return it to the setup assistant in approximately 3 minutes is probably about the best that we can expect kind of anywhere. So, there's a lot of things. It will go through a multiple reboot cycle as part of this process. It reboots about 4 times during this process, but that's the longest task that you have to face as an admin. And you can see I haven't had to touch this machine. It's just hanging out here doing its thing. And it'll be back at Setup Assistant ready to go through the initial deployment workflow of my environment. So it's re-enrolled in Apple. It never left the Apple Business Manager enrollment, but it's ready to re-enroll in my MDM at this point. And
well,
so
I
when
was
we
going
get,
to clarify
go ahead.
that's a key part. It's ready to re-enroll. It's ready for the next user. And I even wonder too, if we're going to see, we've not really had this mass unenrolled decommissioning with remote work. I mean, we're probably in another year, there's going to be a lot of weird things happening with devices, employees that maybe working for companies remotely. This like whole, what do you do with machines? And one of the things I've always thought about a lot is like, let's say, for example, like Tom, you have this webinar today. What if your Mac like breaks like an hour before or something happens?
That's
Well,
right.
obviously, I know you
Right.
probably got a garage just full of them, but the average person, like, will we see an option where IT says like, hey, we're sending you a new Mac, but we want you to keep your old one. That's your spare. That's your kind of your backup. Again, it's hard to say, hey, your Mac's broken. We're going to ship you a new one in 3 to 5 days. And then now it's actually really hard to even get a computer. And
That's right.
so that's now what I want to see somebody do, and I would love to see a video of this, is I want to see, like, you remember back in the day when we were all doing the Wi-Fi and we would like, they do the bake-offs and they put them on the gym and you would say like, all right, here's 100 Macs, 100 iPads, and we just try to watch a video. I want to see like somebody in a gym or some sort of conference room with like 100 Macs like sitting in a big room and go through and like see how quick they can all be wiped.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, that
The store,
process
I
is
would bet the
entirely
store every night.
Yeah, I was going to say that's an entirely multi-threaded process for Apple devices, because the only network traffic that you have to do at that point is just the erase command. And so the existing erase command in JumpCloud today restored this machine ready to go so that it's ready for its next person. And I've got the remote management screen up here, and if I click through, it'll actually take me back to the point where, like, hey, I've got to do my authentication as as I joined the AFC Richmond team. And so essentially it's like it's ready to go. And the only thing the system had to do was go through the activation layer. And so the network traffic that was required for all this was incredibly minimal. So there's no reason you couldn't set up 500 of these in a conference room, as long as you had space for them to sit, that you could at that point set them all up, wipe them, set them all up again. And it's an entirely a multi-threaded process, because the only network traffic that has to happen is the device has to accept that command. So it's a pretty seamless little operation to go through erase all contents and setting. This is the feature that admins have been asking for, I don't know, a decade, ever since it came to the iPhone. The ability to rapidly reprovision a Mac and get it ready for the next person is nothing short of astonishing. And so my deepest thanks to everybody who worked on this feature at Apple. You've clearly made a lot of MacAdmins' lives so much better.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh,
Everybody's favorite app, Configurator.
I was going to say, we just talked a little bit about using Configurator for IPSWs and refreshing macOS devices that use Apple Silicon. But, one of the challenges that we've also faced as admins is that everything I just did with this Intel MacBook Pro required it to be an Apple Business Manager. And for organizations that kind of have bought hodgepodge over the years, either because, hey, our VP was in Boston, their computer ended up in the river, so we needed a new computer. They just went to an Apple store and bought one. Well, guess what? That machine is now not an Apple Business Manager, and so won't be set up correctly. And so the next time that machine gets set up again, it's not going to go through that automated enrollment process that we just showed off here. And so the what we get as part of this new the new operating system is the ability to register a Mac with an iPhone and essentially say, hey, look, this is my iPhone. I've got it signed into my device manager Apple ID that I use with Apple Business Manager. And if you've ever paired a watch with your phone, you're used to seeing that swarm of dots that flow around. If you're on the correct screen of a Mac and you have the phone nearby, they talk over Bluetooth, and essentially the Mac goes into pairing mode. And so at that point, the device can be, if the device is not an Apple Business Manager currently, it can be added. This is the first time that Apple admins have had the ability to add devices to Apple Business Manager that have been purchased outside of their normal purchasing relationships. This is a huge change and incredibly welcome, and requires an iOS device in the hands of your fleet manager, for example, to make sure that device gets added to Apple Business Manager. And what's great about it is that you don't need to type anything in on the individual workstation. It just uses the Configurator app that is available through the App Store today, and using your Apple Business Manager account to handle that pairing relationship and provide the device with an Apple Business Manager enrollment that gets the device there. Now, a couple things you got to recognize. This enrollment is provisional, much like an ABM enrollment for an iOS device is provisional for the first 30 days. And it can be removed. Even if your profile is set to non-removable, you can still remove it in the first 30 days. So if you've got a machine that's going to do a return to service workflow that was bought outside of your usual space, maybe it needs to sit on a desk for 30 days for that profile to kind of like harden, right? And it does require an iOS device for this. You can't do it Mac to Mac. You can't do it Mac to iPad. It is an iOS device, not an iPad OS device for this. And it also requires an account that has device manager permissions in Apple Business Manager. So it does use a managed Apple ID, not a standard Apple ID. So there are some caveats that are around the corner here, but this is a great way for organizations to add to their fleets for automated device enrollment, especially if you've picked up a couple of used Macs on the cheap. Now you can make those Macs part of your enterprise. And that's the really exciting part of Apple Configurator for macOS Monterey.
Where I really want to see happen with this in the future is, so, okay, here, going back to what I said earlier, you have a machine break, you got an important meeting. You would like to be able to say, like, if you're an IT person, say, hey, I want you, we've have you, you have a local Best Buy, just go find anything in stock and we'll make it work. Go find a MacBook Air, just whatever you need, just we'll get you back up and running. You got a webinar today. If you're distributed, it's going to be challenging to get that machine into ABM because you're not going to have that, maybe have that device that can scan it. So what would be cool is if you could say like some sort of temporary authorization. So on this, like a future version of this app, and it says like, log in as a temporary admin, some sort of, maybe a code, or maybe I scan a QR code on my computer that then makes my phone like an ABM admin for 30 seconds or 30 minutes. I can remotely add that Mac, for an IT professional, then it's in there. So again, I think that's where this will go in the future, is a way to add these things remotely without having to have an IT person's or dedicated ABM manager's device.
Yep. And I think that there are going to be some good opportunities in the future. This is obviously day one. This is first steps. But it's nice to hear Apple kind of take the feedback that, MacAdmins have had over the years and say, hey, I saw that you added, this feature to Configurator. Is there a way that we can add this for macOS devices, not iOS devices? Now, it's also important to recognize that there are some limitations on what kind of Macs can be joined this way. It needs a T2 security chip, which means it's machines from 2016 and later, 2017 and later. I will double check and make sure that that's in our resources. But it needs an Apple T2 security chip in order to complete that enrollment process and have that enrollment profile be unremovable. So needs to be T2 or Apple Silicon, and those are two of the other requirements that are there.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Oh, this was my favorite. I live and die by focus modes here.
Oh yeah, no, I was going to say we got focus modes for the first time. I mean, focus modes that aren't do not disturb, right? Like I feel like they're we had do not disturb, and there was one focus mode for a long, long time.
Right, so
and
nobody used it unless they
nobody
were
used
sleeping.
it. I mean, I would use it for when I'm in like webinars like this. I turn off all of my alerts. I put, slap the machine into do not disturb, and off I go. But when iOS 15 brought us multiple focus modes and the ability to have a focus mode that was not just do not disturb, but maybe, hey, I'm in work land right now. I'll let work bug me, but I'm not going to let anything else bug me. And so there are some useful kind of contexts that are present here. And also this will, if you're signed into the same Apple ID across Monterey and iOS 15, devices that are aware of each other in that regard. So if you put on do not disturb on your phone, then, or put it into work mode or school mode, or even just productivity mode, you'll have the ability to kind of bring those kind of focus settings directly to your Mac workstation as well as your iOS workstation. So it's one trigger across all your devices, and that's exciting.
That's big.
So what do you love about focus modes, Pam?
I love that I don't have to touch it after I set it. It's a set and forget. So I use work mode and I use sleep mode. And there are some people who are allowed to text me during the day, and there are others who are not. and I love the ability to be able to configure that, or to be able to say, these apps absolutely bug me. These apps go away. I never want to see a Facebook notification.
Right.
Things like that. So the specification between app or person really makes the granularity is beautiful.
Yeah, there's a lot to love.
Super excited about this.
Where I want to see this go in the future is, so I like the idea of like adding context or contacts, people. We'll say people. I can't say it.
People.
I'm from the South. We don't speak very clearly. But like people like exist for me, like across email, like iMessage, Slack, like one person may exist multiple places. And that person, I may like, if I want my boss to be able to get a push notification for an email, a text message, or a Slack DM or a Slack tag, like in a channel. So if you've not used Slack, or you tag somebody, like I want the ability to like sit, like almost like somehow create an identity for that person in focus and say, for this person, anytime they mention my name, send me a message, send me an email, I want to see it. Anybody else, I don't want to see it. And so that's the
Or
challenge. And
conversely.
that's, well, right. It's like this person I never want to see. And so I think that's where I'd love to see this go in the future, is to start bridging identities across services. I don't know how that happens. Maybe that's an API that you have to do, or you add a Slack profile into the contacts section. But that's where I would love to see this go in the future, because I think there are so many ways for people to kind of reach us, and that person you may want to, may not be where you see them over text messages, but like, if I'm like heads down doing some work on my Mac, I don't want to see all the Slack alerts, but like if this one person sends me a text or a Slack alert, I want to see it and bust through that. And so it actually almost helps you focus, because you don't, even if you are in focus mode, you're not worrying if you're missing important information from these key people, or even a particular Slack thread, going back to that.
So Tom, I wonder, in contacts, if we were to, I don't know that there's a Slack option for one of your contact names, but that would be
I know
kind of
there
an
is in
interesting use
iOS.
of that.
And so on the iOS side, you have the ability to kind of drive some of those notifications, and that the contexts can be added there for external contacts in other applications. So that you can say, hey, look, my cousin is on Facebook Messenger, and I'll let them through because they're going through a really hard time right now, and I want to make sure that I see their messages when it's important. But I don't necessarily want to hear from my high school classmates or my college classmates. And so there are some functions there that will allow that through for iOS. I think that what I want to see is this feature to mature into macOS's contexts as well. And so I would expect that we'll see more as we get into the springtime releases around being able to do that for contacts in individual app contexts based on macOS side of things. But I think a lot also depends on how many people actually test this out. Because we know that Apple, keeps really tight control over, hey, how many people are using this new feature that we deployed? And they certainly are aware, and they make resource decisions based on how many people are using it. So if you're, a fan of this kind of model, pick it up and use it. It may not do everything you need it to do today, but it shows to Apple that you've got a commitment to making it right for the long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Universal control.
This is one of those things that I'm excited for, and it requires, it allows for a little bit more flexibility between iOS and macOS devices. Because right now, for example, if you set up your iPad next to your Mac, those are two separate devices, and there's no real common, intermediate, good way of getting things back and forth. It isn't like AirDrop, right? Or some other mechanisms there. But now it's possible that you'll be able to set up a Mac and an iPad and be able to be like editing away on a podcast, and like Jason Snell does for 6 Colors on his, or the Incomparable on his iPad, and then just be able to just drag and drop that straight through from his iPad directly onto his Mac. So this is one of those features that we think is going to be out just a little bit later. I think this is going to be in 15.1 for iOS and 12.1 for macOS. So I'll be excited to see what they can do here. I think that there's a lot of, for all of the folks out there who are living and dying between devices, so iPads and Macs, multiple Macs, this will be a good way for you to, with a single keyboard and mouse, handle control across those lines. And so your mouse cursor can just like slide off the left-hand side and end up on the right side of your iPad, even if your iPad doesn't have like a touch cursor attached to it. So this is the way to handle, a bunch of devices together for one piece. And I think that that's kind of what's there. I think I'm going to be really interesting to see what this turns into. But this is there's a lot to like about the possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, shortcuts.
I'm not a big shortcut user. Why should I use shortcuts?
Well, I don't use it on iOS. I am more of an automations on the Mac kind of person. On iOS, there's a handful. I think where shortcuts is going to be example is in, you may not be the type of person that build something yourself, but I really am looking forward to say, what kind of app developers kind of come up with ideas for their own. Like, for example, I'm a big Alfred user, and there are things I do in Alfred that I would never have done unless they built the functionality. So I sort of see this from a mindset of like, yeah, I'm not going to build stuff, but I'm excited to see what other people build and the developers of the apps I use build. It's one of those things where if you do a common task over and over again, this is going to be a way to automate it. And this may be where, if you're an IT professional, you have your core apps that your company uses, maybe where you come up with some that your company can use. Maybe that's a way you can kind of offer a service like, hey, we know many of you all are doing budgets in this app. It now has shortcut support. We built some ways to automate that. So we'll see.
Yeah.
It's really neat. I think it's just, when I look at shortcuts, I look at like a continued bridging of the macOS and iOS experience to where you can do things on both, and it's less of like one device versus the other, but it's just a shared experience. Similar to universal control.
I remember a long time ago, I think this conference was coming up on 19 years ago this fall. The O'Reilly Books people had a OS 10 conference in San Jose called 10Con. And I went out for that conference, and that was where I learned the magic of the Unix pipe command, where I can take the result of one command, pipe it to another, take the results of that, pipe it to yet another command, pipe it to another command. And it was like the world just opened up inside my head. And so the ability to string together multiple common tasks into like a pseudo program at that point run at the command line was a way to get information off of a machine that I couldn't have gotten otherwise. Shortcuts is doing that, but for individual piped applications. And so I'm excited to start playing around here. There are a couple of great sources. The folks over at macstories.net have a couple of really great shortcuts to start with if you want to just get started and play around. I think that you're going to have the ability to execute shell scripts this way. You're going to have the ability to execute individual application changes this way. So if you've been looking for a great way to kind of pipe some notifications around your environment, shortcuts might be a good way to handle that. So take a look at it. I think that this is one of those features where I think we don't know what it doesn't do yet. And we also don't know what it could be capable of. We're going to have to invent the future together. And so I'm excited to kind of take some, experiential learning classes in diving into, a half hour on shortcuts, and let's figure out what I can build in half an hour. So I'll be excited to play around.
Next year, like around March, you'll be doing a shortcuts webinar?
We'll see. Maybe there's a version of like the shortcuts for JumpCloud admins that we could come up with.
Oh, that'd be slick. That would be slick. All right, more privacy. Who doesn't want more privacy, right?
I definitely do. And
yeah, email spam. I mean, spam's gotten better, but where I tell you so just from a high level, like what does this mean for end users? You can create a temporary email address that's tied to your iCloud account that's like awesome for newsletters, shopping lists, things like that. I'll tell you where I see this using, and this is not a new technology, like plenty of people have had this for forever. There's now just a more of a centralized way to manage those inside of iCloud. Where I will use this is when I'm registering for conferences. I will use my name plus this conference, and then the nice thing is after the conference is over, if you're tired of the spam you're getting from the conference, or the not spam, but like the targeted emails, when you're ready to be done, you can remove it, and you'll no longer get email addresses for that conference.
Yeah, I've been known, and you can see this is actually my list of individual apps that I have hidden my email for. I hid it for AllTrails, I hid it for Adobe Scan, I hid it for Dairy Queen, for Drizzly, for Etsy, for ExxonMobil. All of those people get a random string of characters. They can't associate that with a person because they're the only person that has that individual email. That's kind of the other thing that's interesting, is that a lot of organizations, when you sign up with tbridge@gmail.com or tom_bridge@mac.com, they will use that information to find out more about you and enrich your record. And so, if you don't want that kind of a possible association, this is a great way to kind of give yourself a little bit more privacy while you're working out there. And Apple wants that to be at the fore of any offering that they've got.
And you don't have to worry about running out of using too many addresses on a phone number for a Gmail address.
Exactly.
Closely
Oh,
related
yes.
or
iCloud
security?
Private Relay. This is, if we think about this, we see a lot of advertisements out there these days for VPN services and for anonymization, or how do I trust that my data is mine, and how do I do those kind of things? Apple's decided that their version of this was called iCloud Private Relay. And in these circumstances, what what iCloud users will be able to do is for web application or web apps that live in Safari, right? Like, so actually not just apps on your phone, but like websites that you go to, you can anonymize your connection a little bit so that your connection goes into Apple and it comes out at kind of a different place within Apple. And at that point, your data is not tied to your home IP address. It's not tied to your iCloud account. It's just kind of out there. It's just kind of, it cloaks your communications in a little bit more of, secret agency goodness, I think is probably the best way to phrase it.
So it's going to be only when you're using iCloud identities?
No, this is any web browser activity that you're doing in Safari.
So it's Safari activity. Okay.
It's Safari activity. It'll also apply to like mail attachments. And so it will, when you download mail attachments, they show up as not coming from your home IP address. They come as showing up from the iCloud Private Relay service.
Oh, that's going to be fun. Bradley?
And then for enterprise applications that are, they need location, or that just causes a problem, there is a way for you to block iCloud Private Relay on your network, where this will particularly apply schools, businesses. So if you're in a situation to where when a user is on my campus, I have a different they get different things. You can go in there and block that. There's if you Google like iCloud Private Relay and you find Apple support document, there's some DNS things you can block. Apple does advise to not silently block them or not to degrade the traffic automatically, because that will cause issues. If they're blocked, your devices that are set up with iCloud Private Relay will understand that's being blocked, and they will alert you to turn off iCloud Private Relay. Again, This feature is still in beta technically. I in the beta, it was okay. I mean, there was certainly some speed degradation, but I do like features like this. I am excited for what this can do in the future. I'm excited for it potentially extending to the rest of iOS and macOS, but there are just some situations for businesses to be aware of. And Tom, you informed me yesterday, there is a payload for supervised devices, managed devices, where you can block access to iCloud Private Relay as well.
That's correct. There is a way for you to actually block this feature at the device level. It is a restrictions payload. We'll have an article up on the JumpCloud website about how this is going to work. But there's a single, preference key that you can actually just say, you know what, not for these devices. And again, those will only work for, corporate-owned devices that are enrolled into an MDM. But that you will have that option to essentially say, no iCloud Relay, please. And having the ability to essentially set that, and will give you the ability as an enterprise to say, hey, look, I just, you know what, I don't want that happening on my machines.
Cool. All right, we've got 2 features left and about 5 minutes. Live text.
Oh.
Slick.
How many times have I gotten a photo from a friend of mine of like, hey, did you see this band's coming to the 930 Club? Or, hey, did you see, this restaurant is opening up there? Or, hey, here's this permit application for a new restaurant. What do you know about that? And then you've got to like manually type in a bunch of information from the image. Well, Apple's live text feature is going to be available in macOS as well. And so you'll be able to, double click on an address and have it open up in Maps. Or you'll be able to double click on the phone number and be able to call it directly from your Mac with Wi-Fi calling. Or the ability to essentially look up somebody's information, look up a name or copy some text out of a written flyer. So I think that there's a lot of nice things here. This is a quality of life upgrade, no question. But yeah, some nice things here.
There's nothing wrong with quality of life. We don't have to be admins
True.
all the time. Bradley, you get the next one.
FaceTime Expands.
FaceTime.
Now, I love FaceTime. I think FaceTime is one of the easiest ways to do the one-off video chats. I think it's very, very easy. It's like the iMessage for video. Where this does, obviously the share play functions are cool, where you can share presentations and things like that. That's all going to be neat. Probably realistically, a lot of you will still be using your company Zoom, WebEx, GoToMeeting, whatever you're using. I don't see organizations like bouncing from those and moving to 100% FaceTime anytime soon. Just because it's so easy to schedule meetings, say in Google Workspace, and there's nice Outlook integrations. But where FaceTime is nice for like that one-off, I particularly find FaceTime audio to be extremely good for quick overseas phone calls. The nice thing is now Windows users and Android users can jump in the call. They'll launch it using a web link. So overall, nice upgrades. Not majorly impactful for the enterprise, but they will be helpful for small businesses that need to connect with clients remotely. I know FaceTime is particularly popular in remote fitness training, remote coaching, things like that, where it's one-on-one coaching. So hopefully, maybe we'll see iMessage for Android and Windows next year. I doubt it, but
well, I think that what I really enjoyed from this is that now you can start FaceTime calls from your browser, and it doesn't depend on having a Mac or an iOS device. And so if you've got friends who are using FaceTime in Chrome on their Windows machine, they're able to participate in your environment and participate in your group calls, as well as your SharePlay calls, which you can share content from from an individual application. So there's a lot to like here about what's coming in with SharePlay and the ability to do some of these features, in across platforms, not necessarily with native apps, but just in progressive web applications like Safari or Chrome.
It'll be interesting to see if it develops into being able to share screens cross-platform as well.
For sure.
That would be amazing, actually. That would be a lot of fun. All right, we have our resources. We have an upcoming product roadmap webinar, and I don't have the date for that.
It's November 9th, so put it on your calendar. Come on out for the JumpCloud Q4 product webinar. We've got some really exciting announcements on what we're planning to build between now and the end of the year, and maybe some commentary on what's coming in 2022, the good secret stuff that I can't talk about on this webinar. But there's a lot to like about that conversation. I'm really excited for everyone to see what we've been working on and what we're working on today.
Yep, this is an exciting place to be right now. Very exciting. There's the link for our article on granting permissions for Monterey PA modules.
Pluggable authentication module. There you go.
Or nuclear disaster, I don't know which.
Either way.
We have our link for blocking macOS updates in Monterey Edition because not everybody should have Monterey on day one.
Right.
We have a JumpCloud lounge where there are numerous channels that you can get involved in, including one that we're really starting to push now for admin life. We'd like as many admins in there as possible. Link to Monterey and a link to 9 to 5 Mac. Thank you, Bradley. Let's have some questions. Can we prevent access to the system if they do not install?
So, in terms of like if they don't do an update, can you prevent them from accessing their system? So with the native tools that Apple provides as part of macOS Monterey, you will essentially not be able to prevent them from accessing the system if they don't update. That's the feature of you'll need to come up with some clever ways to do that as an admin. But there are certain things that you can do, including using these new deferral options to essentially say, hey, look, we're going to let you defer this a little bit, but not forever. You're going to have the ability you're going to require this operating system update at some point very soon. So I think that there are some tools that you can use there on the open source market. If you really want to kind of, so should we say, nag your users to death or nudge them into doing the right thing? And nudge would be one way to look at this from macOS perspective.
Great, thanks, Tom. Does the forcing of updates, let me read this question over again. Does the forcing of updates with force work with updates that require user approval?
Yes. And so essentially what will happen is there'll be an Apple notification in the upper right hand corner of the screen that basically says you have a required update that is required for your machine. And then when you click install tonight, it's going to prompt them for their if they're on an Apple Silicon machine, it will prompt them for their user password, which is their owner password in the parlance of like disk ownership in Apple Silicon systems. And then that counts as user approval at that point. And so essentially that's the process there. So, yep.
Great, thanks. Does it reinitiate? Go on.
So
Tim.
I think this question has to do with the erase all contents and settings. And the question is, does the erase all contents and settings feature initiate the MDM enrollment, or does it maintain the existing MDM enrollment? It's a whole new MDM enrollment. Because everything that was associated with that user, everything that got created from Setup Assistant all the way through until such time as we get to the the user's end of life with your organization, that all gets wiped. And so you get a fresh MDM enrollment profile at the point of completing erase all contents and settings. And that's where this machine that is on my desk started over again. It has to pass through that remote management screen. It has to then sign in with JumpCloud and get its personalization. All of those things, just happen there. So.
Excellent. Let me get your next question. Maybe.
But that's one of the huge benefits of erase all contents and settings at that point, is that it's like being back at the Setup Assistant, just like you've taken the machine out of the box for the very first time. And so really what you could do as an admin is you receive a machine from a departing employee who's not leaving under any kind of legal hold situation or anything else like that. All you need to do is send that erase command, and you see it wipe, and then you can just shut it down at that point, and it will complete that process.
Do you have to then re-add them to the MDM profiles if DEP isn't working?
Yeah, so if DEP does not quite work as expected, and device enrollment program, or excuse me, automated device enrollment is how Apple likes to talk about it today. If automated device enrollment, it doesn't succeed for some reason, you either need to send a command to the machine, profiles, renew, -type enrollment, or you need to, take it through that same erase cycle again. But that's the other nice thing here. One of the challenges with Big Sur machines when they don't necessarily, process that registration correctly from Apple is that you have to wipe the machine and start again 45 minutes. Well, now what you just do is you log in, sign in, and then the user can also trigger erase all contents and settings at that point. And the machine just gets wiped again, comes back to Setup Assistant, comes back to automated device enrollment, and you've only lost 7 or 8 minutes and not an hour.
The user can do that if they're not an admin?
The user can only do that if they're an admin. However, if you've been through automated device enrollment, at least if you're the only user on the box, you're an admin user.
Right. Okay. So when's the best time to enable File Vault on a device that's been wiped?
As soon as possible. Generally speaking, I try to assign that policy to every machine I manage. And so essentially during that process, you have them go through, their initial setup, and then you just say, restart your machine as soon as you're able. And it will take them through that File Vault enrollment as soon as they go through the next restart cycle.
Right. The nice thing is that the user doesn't have to think about it.
That's exactly right. And all they just need to do is click enable now after they've typed in their password, and they're done.
Right. What state is the machine left in after erase all contents and settings? Is it ready for zero touch? Is it, hi puppy? Is it still, well, we know it's not still an MDM because you already said that.
It's not an MDM, but it's ready for zero touch. And so that was what we showed with this machine during the process. Right. Was it was a setup machine. We issued the erase command, and then it was back at Setup Assistant to go through that zero touch enrollment so that the user can then be prompted for that entire process, and they can authenticate themselves to your instance and say, hey, I'm Tom Bridge. This is my JumpCloud password. Authenticate me, add this device to my devices list, and then receive any configurations that are associated with the automated device enrollment group. So there's a lot to love about this feature in terms of making your admins' lives better.
It kind of don't over, almost like think of it as it's a new machine again, because that, and that
That's right.
user data is gone, like it's ready for how it would be if it was new. And again, this is why I think it can be so powerful as a spare machine, because it's not like a situation to where you've got now multiple machines that have company data, like you kind of, increase your threat vector by 2, but it's like, hey, just keep it. And if you ever need it, just pull it out, connect it to your Wi-Fi, we'll re-enroll it. You can do your thing. You can restore your data, like all that cool stuff. But just it's not necessarily, I think, but it's not really taking up a license in your MDM, I guess, because it's out of the MDM.
That's right. I was going to say the license doesn't exist at that point, and off you go.
So Bradley, I'm assuming this is regarding shortcuts. Will there ever be a repository for these types of Mac automations for small companies that maybe don't have developers who are specifically allocated for IT and whose IT departments might consist of, I don't know, solo IT contributors or the one-off consultant who comes in, those kinds of places.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think so much of what is impactful for shortcuts for end users can still be impactful in business as well. And so again, as Tom mentioned, our friends at Mac Stories have a wonderful repository of just awesome shortcuts that even things like, you wouldn't even think that are useful. Like say, this is not new to macOS, but it's for iOS, where you can send your spouse a text message with your ETA when you're leaving work.
Yep.
Because if you work from home, that's a 1 second walk. But no, it's just even things like that may be written for personal use, could still be useful in the workplace. So even things like logging mileage, things like that. So kind of look at what is on Mac Stories archive, and then I think if there's enough interest out there, I'm sure somebody will build it. But shortcuts is one of those things, particularly on the Mac. It'll be really fun to see what people build that would be impactful for the enterprise.
Great.
So I know that there are also a couple of websites out there today that support this. There's shortcutsgallery.com, there's shareshortcuts.com. Most of these are tied for iOS shortcuts right now, but they're going to be expanding into macOS as well.
Terrific. So folks, we're going to go about 10 minutes over because apparently we have lots of questions in the queue. So sit tight. If it doesn't get answered now, I know. If it doesn't get answered now, it'll get answered in a little bit, or it'll get answered afterwards somewhere. So this one, Bradley, I don't know, whoever wants to grab this. Does iCloud Private Relay handle all web traffic or just the DNS resolution? Is it always DNS?
All Safari traffic, but you block it through blocking the DNS resolver.
Right. Yeah. So the feature itself, it's meant for use in Safari, and at that point, it does do encrypted DNS lookup for those individual sites. But again, these are going to depend a lot on the type of the network that you're on. If you're just on your regular home network and you want to conceal that, turn on your iCloud Private Relay, and it shunts all of that traffic in Mails attachments and Safari web pages. It won't work with other browsers. So if you're using the Brave browser on iOS or anything like that, that's not where it's going to participate. So, yep.
Great, thanks. Our next question, is releasing a Mac from Apple Business Manager no longer a one-time event? Theoretically, can a Mac added by a hardware vendor to ABM be released and then later added back to ABM by iPhone Configurator? Good
I'm
question.
holding one right here. It works exactly like it's advertised. We released this machine from the other Apple Business Manager that it was part of, used a configurator for iPhone to register it to another organization's Apple Business Manager. It will not work if the device has not yet been released. So you do have to release it. But that you're absolutely correct. Releasing a Mac from ABM is no longer a one-time event. It's something that can happen multiple times during the lifespan of a Mac. And that's a huge win for admins everywhere.
Cool. So here's someone whose practice is to archive the user directory of all returned laptops before they erase them.
Yep.
Can you suppress the ability for a user to erase all contents and settings?
Yes, you can. And there's an MDM payload for this as well. The restriction will take that away from even admin users will not be able to run erase all contents and settings.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
So you can make this an IT only tool if you want to, because there are certain circumstances where an organization might be concerned. Hey, hey, this person is leaving the organization, and I want to see what the state their computer's in before before they clear waivers or something along those lines, or before we send them their last paycheck. So there are circumstances where you may, as an admin, want to deploy that just so you can archive the user, just like the the questioner suggested. So that's a possibility for your organization.
Okay. So this is a two-part question. We'll do the first one first. Do you have any ideas on running macOS Monterey on older Macs? Is there a hardware reason not to upgrade?
Not that I can derive. If they're already happy as clams running on Big Sur, Monterey will be no different. Monterey is a refinement release in a lot of senses, and actually does a lot better job in memory management for some applications. I found that Chrome handles things a little bit better under Monterey than it was under Big Sur, but I feel pretty good that there's no reason not to upgrade. Obviously, your security software and your other requirements, notwithstanding, but just on its own, I don't see a reason not to upgrade.
All right. So is there, I'm gonna ask Bradley to handle the second part of this, which is there a way to push updates for people who are still using older versions of macOS, such as Catalina?
You won't have any of the new software update features that like are in Monterey, but like so you'll basically have was there before. So the like legacy tools are still there, and it's you can do things like delay, but at this point there's nothing to delay other than just some like the latest Big Sur. But the tools that were there yesterday are there today.
That's right. And there are some tools like, for example, Monkey, which can do operating system updates. And so if you're using Monkey as patch management inside your organization, you can make the macOS Monterey installer a required install with an install date and time requirement. Do I think that that's the best tool as an organization? Maybe not. I think that the carrot and the stick are a great way to kind of combine efforts and basically say, hey, look, we have an organizational goal to all be on macOS Monterey by the end of the year. Please help us make this goal. It's really important to our security platform that we all be on the most secure version of macOS, and that the most secure version of macOS is macOS Monterey. So I think that there are some ways that you can treat this in terms of making your coworkers aware of how important it is to be on the right version of the operating system at the right time.
So if a device is under File Vault and the user has never signed
in, I'm guessing.
Are they restricted from getting past the login window?
Correct.
Don't.
Because they have never been so essentially if you've added a user with JumpCloud, for example, and they've never been signed into a booted system, they will never have the right way to actually get through the login prompt for File Vault, because the system only allows certain types of users. Now, I mean, obviously any user that's been through automated device enrollment has a secure token and has been granted access to the system. Users that are added after the fact, they have to pass through the login window of a booted machine before they're going to be able to be fully capable users at that point.
Okay. Great, thanks. So is Apple Configurator for iPhone available? It's not in the App Store.
I was just going to go look. If quick tip for MacAdmins, if you are not a member of the Apple Seed program for IT, you can absolutely do so for free. It gives you access to the betas. It gives you access to developer forums, all sorts of useful things, including organizational feedback mechanisms for your feedback to Apple at that point. It's really important that as an organization, you have a good way to reach Apple in a clear and concise way, and Apple Seed is a great way to do that. And if you go to the download section of Apple Seed, it's listed as beta 4 still, so this may not be in full production. However, the app does work as designed, so you should be able to at that point download the app for your devices and go to town from there.
Great, thanks, Tom. Okay, so this is our last question. If a company has a web service on a private IP that is only published to the local DNS server, will the DNS lookup fail, or will it fall back to the local DNS server when resolution fails?
It will fall back to I'm assuming this is an iCloud private relay question. So if you are doing this with a web app and essentially Apple's DNS can't make heads or tails of it, yes, it will absolutely go through and go back. Although your user may want to turn off iCloud private relay in that case. And just say, hey, look, I just want to use my local DNS to resolve against this. You may want to essentially tell your coworkers, you can't use iCloud private relay and sign into this web application. It may just be more simple to support a situation where you don't have to worry about that complexity.
Great. Guys, do you have any final thoughts before we say thank you and bye-bye?
Brad, I'll let you go first.
It's a great upgrade. I haven't done it yet or not in production, because I like to wait till the first couple of bug fixes. I mean, I think that's always the big question is like, should I upgrade? And it's maybe not. I think there's a difference in wanting things to test and be ready for your users and like ready for your production machine that has tightly integrated things in terminal, homebrew, and all that fun stuff. Like assume things are going to break. Give yourself an afternoon at least, if not to fix things. And if you can, maybe wait a few weeks until I'm sure a 0.01 or a 0.02 release will be out.
Well, the release that we got was 12.0.1. And that's because 12.0 is reserved for the new 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros, which are shipping now. And if you have not taken a look at the processor specs on those things, they fly. I'm really excited to get my hands on one at some point and do a more detailed review and tear apart on how I think that they operate. But I haven't gotten there yet. So I will take the converse spot and say, look, you should have, as part of your summertime testing, you should have a pretty good idea of what works and what doesn't for your organization by now. And so even though the final release was just yesterday, I can comfortably say that, I've been living on the betas since beta 6 and have been a happy camper. No major deal breakers at this point. And so there's a lot to like here in macOS Monterey that will make you a more productive MacAdmin. And of course, as we just discussed, the most secure operating system is the one that Apple just released. And that is especially true of major releases. Apple basically says, look, the only operating system that we are going to fully patch for every CVE we fix is the most current operating system. And you can see that in the behavior of their security disclosures. And so getting on that operating system as soon as you can make that a comfortable move for your organization, and to treat it as a user-led migration so that your individual coworkers can pick a good time to upgrade from macOS Big Sur or from macOS Catalina or from macOS Mojave. That's important thing there. So be aware of that. As we take a look at the things, you don't want to abandon people on older operating systems unless you've got a really good reason. And so try and get your people forward as soon as you possibly can. And thanks, everybody.
Great. Brad, thank you so much for joining us. Tom, amazing as always. Thank you. I'm thrilled to have been able to do this with you guys. It was a great experience. Take care, everyone.
Great job, Pam.
Please subscribe and check out more content from us.